Good evening and welcome to our webinar tonight or this morning. Thank you for joining us again or joining me again. My name is Harald. I am the managing director of Bruce Copen. Joachim, hello to Mexico. Pleased to see you. Chris, hi. Hi to the UK. Wow, it's great that you're from all different areas of the world. Is really great. Peter, hi, pleased to meet you. Anna, thank you for joining. Great, great, great. Good to have you all. Thank you for joining me tonight. I promised tonight I'm gonna make it shorter, not as last time where you had to stay so much longer. Let me just share the screen. Tonight, we gonna have to share the screen so that you can see it. Tonight we gonna talk about the practical application of the Mars 3. And I think all of you have been attending 2 weeks ago when I was talking about the theory. Tonight, we're gonna talk only about practical application of the Mars 3 or scope Q. Both it's 95% the same. The only difference between the two is when it comes to broadcasting, and but I'll explain that when we come to that area. Chris is asking whether we're gonna have a recording. Of course, we record this also tonight, and we make that available to you. Unfortunately, our web designer, they've been on holiday last week, so the recording from 2 weeks ago is just gone online today. So we're gonna shoot out a mail probably early next week to announce you. But when you log into our website and you go into where you've purchased or where you've registered for this event, you will see the recording of 2 weeks ago. So if you just log in, and then you can you become the last time webinar available, and the recording of this one tonight or this morning will be quicker available than the last one, because as I said, our web administrators have been on holiday, so this one gonna be processed quicker. So let's just look into what you're gonna expect tonight. We are having tonight part 2 of this webinar series, and there will be another part 3 where we're going to talk about the database. That's on the 7th of May, sorry. And part 4 where we talk about the color tuning will be on the 21st of May. But today I'm gonna show you how you put in a client, how you run a scan, how you do the interpretation of a scan. We're gonna discuss all that tonight. So I'm gonna give you a brief overview over the hardware, and then an overview over the Scope Q software or Scope 8 software, the elements of the software. We talk about how to add a patient. We talk briefly about the database, because the database is going to be discussed in depth next time, in 2 weeks' time. Then we talk about how to run a test. And we, of course, talk also about how to balance a patient. So let's start with the hardware. Most of you either have a Mars 3 or a Scope Q device, and all our systems always contain of 2 things. It's the hardware, which is either the Mars 3 or the Qubit device, and it's a piece of software which you install on your computer. And this is a picture of the Mars 3 hardware. You have on the right side, you have an input cup here. And on the left side, you have the output cup. And in between both, you have a card slot, and that's for the EECS cards. These are cards which you can also use for treatment. You can program information on these cards and use them then as a balancing media for your clients. There are, of course, other features, like here is, for example, a jog dial. You would need that jog dial when you edit the user menu of the Mars 3. The user menu can be entered when clicking on this little toolbox on the right corner of the display. You need the jog dial to maneuver in the display or set values in the display, for example, for the IP address. But I warn you not to change it, because otherwise your device might not connect anymore to the computer. And we have here something most of you might eventually have never used, this black oval area. That's the stick pad. That's basically for manual testing. I don't know if anybody uses that. If you do, let me know in the comments, because that's really something I think, because we have this automatic test algorithm, I think nobody really uses that function anymore. But that's basically taken over from the classical Bruce Copen devices, where you always had the stick pad. And there's a special technique to it. You rub the plate gently with your fingers, and on the screen of the software, you change the parameters, the rates that you're testing. You can also change them with the jog dial and move them unit by unit. And when you come to a parameter that gives a resonance for the particular patient, you have a stick effect. It's effect like your fingers are kind of attached to the surface, like if you have a magnet in your hand and you come close to a metal surface, and the magnet will be pulled towards the surface. It's a similar feeling. It's like your fingers gets magnetically attached to the surface. It's an effect which, of course, comes from your nervous and muscular system. You unconsciously push harder on the surface, and then you have that feeling that the fingers stick on the surface. But as I said, this is a vintage function which nobody uses today. Most people use today the automatic function. I mean, that's how what the device is designed for, to use it for the automatic testing. So just to be complete, those of you who use the Scope Q software, there we only have one input-output cup. It's this one here in the middle. It's a little well. And in that well, you can put either a hair sample or blood sample. It's the same with the Mars 3. And when it comes to creating remedies, this well becomes also the output cup. And we also have an EECS slot, but that's here at the device at the front. You can slide in a card. And I just want to show you, the card goes in like this. The magnetic strip is on the bottom, and you slide in the card like this into the device. So the magnetic strip faces downwards, and you slide in the card like this into the device. So if that's the slot of the device, it goes in like this. With the magnetic strip facing down, it goes in like this. So that's just for the people who use the Scope Q qubit software. And and then both devices are connected to the software, and the software is installed on your computer. And I want to show that to you now. I need to just change my screen sharing. So I'm gonna show you, or everything I show you tonight is on the Scope 8 software, but it's basically, as I said, well, 95% similar to the Scope Q. So let's first check out the various elements we have in the software. You can see we have here on the side various buttons. We have, for example, here what's called Copen Today. That's the entry screen of the software. That's the screen you see right now in the middle. And underneath it, we have the patient area. So if we click there, it changes to the patient view. That's the one we will discuss first. That's how to add a patient to the database. Underneath that, we have an icon which is described as the database. And if you click there, you will come to the heart of the system, basically. That's the rates database. I will talk today only very briefly about it because, as I said, that's topic of in 2 weeks' time, where we discuss everything, how you can edit the rates, how you can add your own rates. Just very, very briefly, you can see here there are various categories, and underneath each category you can see it expands if you click on the plus, and you can see how various subcategories will become visible until you see the actual rate itself. So for example, we have here the rate for brain in general, and you can see there is the number I tried to explain you last time. That's the rate number that codes for the brain in this case. If you have any questions, because for convenience, I keep the chat windows closed, but if you have any questions, just type them in the chat, and later I will read out the questions to everyone and will try to answer them as best as I can. Underneath the database, we have the test wizard. The test wizard is everything to do with testing. So we have the entry test, which we today don't use anymore because we have more or less incorporated that into the main test now. I will show that later to you. We have the potency test for testing homeopathic potencies, and we have the color tuning. Again, today we will focus on main test, and I will also talk about the potency test, and color tuning will be subject to the fourth part of this webinar. And finally, we have here projections. We will talk about that later because right now I cannot, I can enter it. This is a projection screen, but I cannot select anything until we have created some data for a patient. So, let's start with adding a patient to the database of the Scope or Scope Q software. From now on, I will always talk about the Scope software, so you know it's both Scope 8 and Scope Q, but just to make it easier, I will only talk about Scope software. So to enter the patient, I need to go here, I click on the patient's icon. That will bring me to the patient's database. And you can see you have here a list of patients already added to the system. And if I want to add a new patient, I click here on Add Patient. And now I can select how I would like to add the patient to the database. There are various options. You can, for example, use a hair sample or a blood sample, or you can use sputum, and you put them in the paper bags we have provided with the system, or you can also purchase more paper bags from us. And if you have sputum, for example, you put it on such a small tissue, you put it in the bag, and we have these glass beakers here, and we suggest to use the glass beakers. In the qubit, you put them just in the well. In the Mars 3, you put them on the right side in the input well, and then you put the sample in the glass beaker, and the glass beaker with the sample then goes in the device. And therefore, you would need to select input cup. The other option is to use our hand applicators. We have the max hand applicators where, if the patient is sitting next to you, can put his hand on, and you scan in the sample directly from the patient by putting his hand on the hand applicators. In my case, I now go for the input cup, and I just click OK here, and that will scan the patient witness into the system. It takes about 10 seconds. And then I can add all the patient data. I put in the first name, just put in some fantasy name now. The last name. These two are mandatory. All the other fields can be filled, but do not necessarily have to be filled. I can select here whether I have a male or female patient, or also, well, we put in here asexual, but that's for, we are living in this gender millennium. So of course, if somebody is in between male or female, you can use that. But also, if you scan, for example, a business, remember, you can also do business consulting with your scope device or Mars 3 device. And that would then come under asexual. Up here, you can select whether you're working with a patient or with a client or with an animal, or, as I just said, with an enterprise or with a plant. A plant would also come under the asexual sex, or if you want to use anything else. In my case, I use the client. If you're using enterprises or plants, you could put in here a project name, and of course the street, city, and so forth, the full address details from the patient. We have additional information here, which is blood group, date of birth, birth time, zodiac sign. Also, you could put in the insurance number. You could use family data to put in here. We have a medical history that can go in here, and we also have a notes field where you can put in additional information. For example, if you prescribed certain herbs or something for the patient to take, or suggested to drink more or whatever, you can take a record here from whatever you have discussed with your patient. And then finally, you have a history tab here. Of course, this is now empty because it's a new client. But if you select the patient that already has a history in the system, you will see here a list of the past tests that you have performed on that client. One field which might be important for you is the external field. Should you use any other database in your clinic where you keep record of your patients, you could put in here an external number that refers that patient to your other patient database. And if you click OK, it will save the data of the patient. You can see now we have here Angelika Schmidt in our database. And also you can see up here, we have selected patient Angelika Schmidt. And that means that she is now the patient that is active. If I want to select a past time patient, let's, for example, go for Tony Tester, I put in his name here in the field last name. So if I put in here Tester, sorry, if I put in here Tester, and I push the enter button on the keyboard, you can see Tony Tester pops up. And I can now either select Tony by clicking with the mouse on him and using the select button up here. You can see now Tony Tester has become the selected patient. And oops, sorry. Didn't want that. So Tony Tester has now become the selected patient. And you will also notice that all your patients here have disappeared. And to bring them back, to bring the list back, you just delete here the search item you've put in, and you click refresh. That will bring back all your other patients. And if we want to go back to Angelika Schmidt, I can just select her here with a double click. You can see now, again, we have Angelika Schmidt selected here. And you can also see we have here more search items. We have, for example, the external number that I said that could reference the patient data to any external database. We have the first name, we have the city, or we have also the patient ID or the zip code of the city. Then, of course, we have here an option to delete a patient. So if I want to, for example, delete this patient here, HM, I select him with the mouse and click delete. Of course, there comes a security question whether I really want to delete that patient. If I say yes, the patient gets deleted. And if I want to add something to my record of Angelika, I select her and click properties here. And I could then, for example, put in some notes suggested to drink more water. And eventually you want to put in here the date at the beginning, so you know when you gave her this suggestion. And the patient data is always the basic for everything you do in the system. And also a question we get asked quite regularly is whether you need to scan in a new patient or the patient data every time the patient comes in your clinic to see you. And actually, you don't have to do that. You can use a patient that you have scanned in once. You can use even in a 1 month's time, in a 3 months' time, in a 4 months' time. You don't have to scan in new, because remember the picture I showed to you the last time. I'm gonna eventually just call that up right now, because it's eventually important to understand that right now at this point. Remember this picture here. We are working on this information level, and whatever we do is here on this information level. It is time and space transcendent. So whatever we do, it has no no meaning in time and space, which means if we test the patient in 3 months, with the hair sample we've scanned today, we have immediate access to his information field here, to his information data. We don't need to scan him new. We can use the old data we scanned in today, even if we want to do a rescan in 3 months' time. However, I do understand that this might be a bit difficult for user compliance or for your client compliance. They might not understand it and ask you, well, how can you do a new scan with hair you scanned in 3 months ago? If that's the case and you want to have peace of mind, you can, of course, scan in the sample again. You do that by searching for the patient. Sorry, you have Angelika Schmidt here. You open it by clicking on Properties, and by clicking on this arrow here, you can actually rescan the sample. It's this arrow here. You can rescan the sample. And so if I click on here, I get the same window. I can select whether I want to scan from the input cup or want to scan from the hand applicators. And yeah, and you can do the scan from there and add the patient again to the database and will overwrite the sample data from today. Eventually, it makes sense. There are already some questions to put them to answer the questions right now while we're in here in this patient database. So there are some. Yeah, first thing is Michaela sent out the email today that the webinar from 2 weeks ago is available. So check your email, please. Check also your spam ordner. Next question was if you can use also a picture for testing. Yes, of course you can. If you use a picture, then just put it in the input cup. I have, for example, here a picture. And if I want to use it, I can just bend it like this, put it in the input cup, and scan it. Also, if you have the picture digital, just do a print out, and you can also fold it, of course, and make it fit in the input cup and then scan it. Next question was, how do you do business consulting with the instrument? Basically, the same way like you do a clinical analysis. Next time when we talk about the database, I will show you there's business data in the database, or I can eventually just briefly point out now. It's here. It's where is it? Companies coaching here. We have our business database, and it's the same thing. You just scan in a business card as a sample, and then you run a test, a scan only on these kind of rates. But how to do that, how you can create a template with that, I'll show you next time in 2 weeks' time. Then there was a question, what is the other used for when scanning? I do not fully understand, Anna, what you mean with that. Could you please repeat that question or pose it in a different way? I don't know what you mean with that question. Please put it in again. Next question was, it is not asking for Tony Tester evidence when you select him. We have actually we have a sample. I think you mean if it asks for a hair sample or a witness, we actually have a sample in Tony Tester, but scan something in, but it's just air basically. So it's just as a sample user or sample client, we have put him in. Next question was, what about DOB that is required? If yes, what format, month, day, year, or day, month, year? Let's check that. DOB is date of birth, of course, and it's here. Actually, that's a bit of a tricky thing. You might eventually want to check with Matthew, our technical support. Normally, we have here the European format. You have day, month, year. So it's first thing is day, the second thing is the month, and then you have the year. So that's here the date format for the date of birth. Now, next question was from Anna again. You can use output or handpads or other when taking signatures. When taking signatures, actually, you have a piece of paper you put also in the input cup, and then you use that as a witness. That's also possible. And I understand now the question. When we go scan here, we have 3 options: input cup, Max handpads, and she asked what is others. Others mean it says aux. On the back of the device, you have 3 auxiliary ports. In one port goes the Max hand applicators, but we also have the large plate. And if you select other and you have the large plate connected to the auxiliary port, you could put a sample also on the large plate. So that's other. Next question is, what is patient witness for? The patient witness is actually the sample of the patient. It's the blood, the urine, sputum, hair sample, or when the patient puts the hands on the hand applicators. And we use the patient witness for everything we do in the device. We use it for running the test, but we also use it, of course, for balancing, and especially in the Mars 3, when we use the multi-broadcaster to treat more people or to balance more people at the same time, we use the patient witness, the patient sample that we've scanned in, as a target for the information. So we send the information that we have tested during our testing session. We use these rates or this information and use it for balancing the patient. But you will see that later when we run through the whole process. Okay, so I hope it's clear here. The data that we can put in here in the patient area. I click refresh here so we see all the patients. Just to remind you, we have here our selected patient is Angelika Schmidt, typical German name. And so let's go next. Let's basically go to the point where we just briefly touch on the database very briefly so that you know what I am doing. I will just give you a very brief overview over the database and the templates now. So actually, as I said before, we can enter the database by clicking on this icon here. This will bring us to the database module. And you can see there are lots of icons here. I won't talk about them right now, just so much that we have here the categories, the various categories. We have here plus symbols in front of the items. And if you click on the plus, for example, in organs, it will open up the organs category and you can see all the subcategories. If I go on brain here, you can see everything that's under brain. And if I go here on the actual rate, you can see there's no plus anymore. So this indicates that I'm actually selecting here a rate, so a real frequency. And if I go preview here, I can see the value of the rate. And I can see also here the additional information we have added in the database for that rate. And the only thing I want to show you right now or touch on briefly is the templates. because the templates are what we actually use when testing a person. When we're testing a person, we do not have direct access to the database. We always have access to the templates. And when we open the templates view, we can see we have here a selection box. And with that selection box, I can open it and I have here access to various templates that we have put in. And remember this view here for a moment, because you will recognize that when we now go to the test wizard, with the test wizard, we have access to exactly this view here, and we can select the templates we want to use for testing. So let's now go into the test assistant, or what we call it, test wizard. That's the next thing we want to talk about. In the test assistant, everything happens that has to do with analysis of the patient. So anything to do with test, with analysis, with diagnosis, that happens in the test wizard. And again, to enter the test wizard, we have to click on this icon here, test wizard. That brings us into the test wizard. Right now you can see the list here is empty because we have done nothing yet. If we would have performed some tests with that patient, we would see here all the past tests we have done so far. And to start with, we go here into the main test. That's now the section we want to enter. I click here, and that brings us into the main test view. You can see it here in the middle of the screen. You always have a reference where you are, and I just want to remember you that up here we are still working with Angelika Schmidt. That's still the patient that we are using with. And we have some settings up here in this area. We have here a level setting. We have here a range type setting. And I just want to briefly discuss these two. If we go to auto level, we could either select one of 12 levels, or we could keep it to auto level. The levels are basically 12 different type of aura layers, if you like, and they correspond to the chakras. So level 1, 2, 3 corresponds to the root chakra. Level 4 and 5 corresponds to the sacral chakra, and so forth. I will explain this in more depth when we talk about the color tuning in our fourth part, because there we really actually work with these 12 levels. Then we also have here the range type, and the range type we could switch here between a percentage scale, over function, under function scale, and pure yes, no scale. Remember, when we're performing a test, we get the results, we do a resonance test, and we get the results by we get a certain value to the actual result that we've done. Remember the chart I showed you last time. We have a stimulating vibration, and which is actually the rate that we test. We have the resonance cell, which is in our case the patient witness that we have scanned in. And if there is a resonance between the patient witness, the resonating cell, and the stimulating vibration, which is the rate, if there is a resonance, we have a result here, and we can see on the scale on how high the amplitude is of the result. We can see here on the scale, either in terms of overfunction, underfunction, or on a percentage scale, how great the resonance is, and the stronger the resonance is, the higher the value will be. If we have a high resonance, will have a value over function, under function 7, 8, 9, or in percentage 70, 80%. And if we have just a low resonance, it will eventually be just 1 over function 1 or 2, or in percentage 10 or 20%. So, and whether we are using the percentage scale or the over function under function scale, we are determining this with our range type here. But for the ease of use, I will switch to percentage because that's easier to explain. Then we have here what we call focusing. And the focusing is basically, we put in there the reason why we perform this test. So there is a reason why the client comes to see you, be it either psychological problems or be it really physical problems. And we describe here in the focusing why the patient is coming to perform a test. We should avoid putting in here any diagnosis, any medical diagnosis, because the medical diagnoses are not or cannot be very exact. Well, if I put in, for example, headache, it's all right, but I should not put in something, for example, like multiple sclerosis, because actually the multiple sclerosis could be eventually a wrong diagnosis. And if I put in just pain in the legs or pain in the left headache, getting worse when working on the computer or something, or sleeping disorder, cannot sleep through, difficulties falling asleep, or paralyzed leg, something like that. So I want to describe the symptoms that the patient is suffering from. I don't want to put in a diagnosis here because the diagnosis can eventually be wrong or just be done for medical purpose, to have a label I can put on this patient, and it might not be exactly describing what the patient really suffers from. Plus, it narrows down the possible results. Remember, we are what we do here, we shine a light on the actual network of various factors in the patient. And if somebody has a paralyzed right leg, there could be various reasons for that. It could be a neurological problem, muscular problem. At least the cause after it all could be a psychological problem, a trauma, or whatever. So we don't want to narrow it down to test a diagnosis. We want to describe the symptoms. So I would put in, for example, lumbar back pain, just as an example for a proper description here. You could also put in here some more or less spiritual thinking. You could say, for example, we want to have the rates to ease lumbar back pain. Thank you if you think that there is some higher entity involved in the whole process, if that's in your belief system, that there is a higher entity, or if you're a religious person, you might want to thank God for helping you to find the right rates here, or to have the person. So this can be, of course, adopted to your personal taste, and that's merely the reason why we do not give any hard instructions what to put in there, because it is more important that you as the operator feel comfortable with what you put in here than the actual words you put in, because this is kind of a focusing that kind of also tunes you into the whole process of this test you're performing here. So whatever you use as a word here, it's important that you as the operator feel comfortable with what you put in there. However, once we have defined why the patient or the client is coming to see us, we start with the actual testing. And remember, I was talking about the templates before, and the actual template we select for testing is here, and we can find them when we click on this selection box here, and you will recognize this is now the same window we had before in the database when we were looking at the template section of the database. And to start with, we are now checking the very first template that's called intake clearance. And if I click on the plus here and the plus there, we can see the content of the intake clearance template. These are basically 6 rates. And we do that before we do the actual test. It's kind of a calibration of the testing system. So the testing system is basically you, the Mars 3 or Scope Q device, and the client. It's a triad. We have 3 components here. We have the scope software with the Mars 3 or Scope Q, and we have you as the operator, and we have the client. It's a triad, and what this kind of pre-test is doing, it aligns these 3 components to be in a maximum possible synchronization. And so it's suggested to do this intake clearance test before every test that you perform in the system. So I select the template, the intake clearance, and to start the actual test, I click here on the little green tree icon, and that will automatically perform the test. And you can see here on this side, we will have our results. And you can see here are the rates. These are the rate names in this list here. And here we have the result. In this case now, we have the results as I selected in the percentage value. And the percentage goes from 0 to 100%. You can select the result by clicking on the headlines. So if I click, for example, on the result headline here, you will see that the results will be sorted in the order from 0 upwards to 100%. If I click on the rate name, however, they will be in alphabetical order. So, but to check the values, I click on the result headline, and I can see they go from 0 to 99%. And we have here on the top right side a section where we can select or more or less delete values that are not necessary for or not relevant for any treatment. So as mentioned, the scale goes from 0 to 100%. And as a rule of thumb, we use all the values which are higher than 70% because they have a kind of a resonance to the patient, which is relevant for the treatment of the patient. But also important are the values with 0. So we have to expand that rule to say everything higher than 70% plus 0. The reason why we use 0 came from our research we have done at CERN Remember, I talked about this two weeks ago that we were with the Mars 3 part of a study in CERN on autism. And one very interesting finding of that study was that rates or values, the parameters that are known to be important for autism, came up very regularly with the value of 0. So the lady that conducted the study said, well, wait a minute, it cannot be that the 0 value are balanced values, because we know that these values in autism are very, very much important. And we've discussed that in one of our user experience groups. And when we brought that to the table, that the 0 might be an important value, a lot of people suddenly came up and said, oh yeah, I noticed that as well. And I also had the idea in the past that the 0 might be very important. So that's why we changed our interpretation of the results and brought up now 0 as a very important rate. And you could eventually explain it in a way that the resonance or the value between 0 and 100% also gives you some kind of an idea how much the energy system of the patient is reacting to the stimulus. Remember the chart I just showed you before, where we have the stimulus and the patient can either react very strong to it or just very, very weak. So, but it's still, even if it's a very, very weak reaction of just 1 or 2, it's still a movement. So the energy system of the patient still reacts to it, just very, very slightly, but still reacts. But if it's 0, if there is no movement, that means actually that there is a blockage, because in nature everything moves. Even mountains change over decades, and are nothing is static in nature. Look at your heartbeat. Your heartbeat is not constant. If you look at the heart rate variability, you will notice that from beat to beat there's a slight offset of a couple of milliseconds every time. If you would have a heartbeat which is really straight, you would probably get immediately a heart attack, or your heart would be seriously, you would have a seriously heart disease, because the heart beats are not straight every couple of I don't know, 30 milliseconds or whatever. There's a variation to it, and if there's no variation, it means there's a disease. And that's why we say that the 0 is a blockage. If you have a 0, that's even worse than 100, because 100 means just a very strong reaction to it, but it still reacts. But if there's a 0, there's no reaction anymore. There's a blockage. So that's why we decided 0 is very important. We keep it in. So if I tick here the 0 and have set the trigger set to 70, I click on the trigger, all the non-relevant rates will be erased. And I can now immediately, if I want to balance this setting, because before I go on, remember this intake clearance that we're doing here is to kind of align this triangle of patient, user, and device. So we want to balance that first before we go on. And to do that, we click here on the session results icon, and we select go to projection. Projection is, as I said, everything to do with balancing. And so before we go on, we want to balance that first. To do so, we have to save that session. It puts in here automatically the name that I've put in the focusing. I can copy that into the Windows clipboard by pushing on the keyboard Control C, so it will save it in Windows clipboard, and it will automatically bring me to the projections area, and you can see the rates that we have found are already loaded here in the system. So, and to do the balancing, I use this icon. We will discuss the other icons later. And I will click now here to do the settings for the balancing. And for now, I want to just use here the default value for this type of balancing. And if I click here, you will see the time settings here change. I have here a duration setting of 15 seconds. That means that these three rates here, the blockages, interference, B and D, will be sent for 15 seconds, and then there will be a pause of 9 seconds. You can see the rates will be sent for 15 seconds, and there will be a pause of 9 seconds. And this whole sequence is going to be repeated 6 times. So to start the treatment, I just click here on the broadcasting icon. That will start the balancing. And if I want to use the hand applicators, I also need to make sure that aux is ticked here, so that if the patient is present, he can put his hands on the hand applicators. If he's not present, I untick that, and it goes via the ether to the client. And therefore, it's important that we have the hair sample scanned in, because now we're actually sending these 3 rates through the information field, and the information from the sample is actually helps us to target that information in the ether or on that information level. So we don't need to wait now until that's finished. I just interrupt that by clicking on the stop icon here, and we go back to the test wizard. So, and go back to the main test. So now we have basically made sure that this triangle of patient, yourself, and the device is aligned and is kind of synchronized. I go back to focusing here, and if I press Control V, I could put in here the session focusing that I've put in when doing the first session for the intake clearance. You can see here now in this list we have now saved the intake clearance session with the name we've put in. I put it back in here. And Control copy. So again, we select the next template that we want to use. So we go on this icon here again. And this time I want to show you something, a procedure that will take you through the whole database and will show you the categories that you need to dig deeper in order to find the rates to solve the problem from the patient. So therefore, we have this template pre-test here. If I select that, you can see it will load a template that has all the first level of the subcategories. And if I start the test again by clicking on this icon here, I will get a result reflecting all the categories that I need to solve the problem actually. So again, I click on, if I want to interpret this, I click on the result headline so that the results are sorted according to the percentage, which gives me a priority also. And we still have set the trigger to 70 and to keep the zero, so I can push the trigger button here to erase everything that's not important. And that will leave me with this kind of results here. Let's just briefly go through the categories that came up here. We have the chromosomes. In the chromosomes, we have the whole human genome, which means that there could be an inherited factor to these lumbar back pain. We have subtle anatomy, which means all the chakras and the etheric body and mental level and the auric levels. So there could be some kind of energetic reason to this. We have the cells according to Dr. Heck. These contains various viruses and bacteria that could play a role here. We have a book of answers, which is more or less a spiritual thing. So this could contain also some kind of psychological element here. We have the monocyte macrophage system, which is basically the blood system. We have the brain, which could refer to some neurological problem here. And we have constitutional remedies, which means we have some homeopathic remedies, which will work here on the more on a symptomatic level, but on a constitutional symptomatic level. So next step we want to do, we want to dig into these various categories and find out the rates that are relevant for this particular problem. And to do so, I go on this. First of all, I want to delete the bottom list here. So I go on Tools and select here delete lower tree. So to clear the lower list. And next thing I do is I go and select here the template for what is called the detail test. It's this one here, it's template 01, 02. That's the detail test. And the detail test will come up with all the various categories we have here. And we can now dig into these various categories and find the rates that we need to treat that patient. So to get a better overview, I click here on rate name, because that will actually sort the list here alphabetically. So I can go through the database beginning with the category 1 and ending up with category 9. So we first look here on our first result. This is, oh, sorry, I crossed that. Sorry. We had here 01, the brain. That's our first category that comes up here. So we want to go in here in category 01, organs. And from that, I click here on the plus. So it opens up all the category 01. And I want to check the first category here, which is the brain. So that's 01 brain here. I can find here 01 brain. So next to the brain, we have here a number in brackets. And actually, if I do a right mouse click on the item, I can see there is a total of 265 rates in the category brain. And with that number 5 here, I determine how many items I want to have as a maximum result out of that category. And that works a little bit like a zoom or like a focus in photography. If I want to have a more detailed view on it, I put in just I want to pull out more rates as a result. So brain, we are talking about lumbar back pain here. It could have of course a neurological component, though. So I might eventually want to increase the number of possible results here to 12. I click OK to select. And in order to get now the 12 most important items out of the brain category, I click on this icon here. It starts the test and will give us the result in the bottom list here. And we can see here the results. You can see the black items in here are these 12 items that the system has selected out of the brain's category. We don't want to discuss that in detail at the moment because we just roughly go through all the other categories that we have as a result. So we pick the next one here, that's 01 chromosomes. So we stay in the category 01, we keep that opened, and we go to chromosomes here, human genome. We have 10 already selected here, so that's fine. So I click on that, chromosomes, and I click on that icon here to get the 10 most important rates out of the chromosomes category. And we go on here with the third item with the monocyte macrophage system here. So we want to scroll down here on this side until we get to the monocyte macrophage system. Here we select it, and again push on this button here to get, in this case, the 3 most important rates out of the monochrome macrophage system. Then we go to 0603, constitutional remedies. So we check out here in that list 0603, constitutional remedies. So we scroll down here. Here we have category 06. I open it by clicking on the plus. And we have here 03, preparations various. I scroll down till I can see here the constitutional remedies. And if I do a right mouse click, you can see there's only a total of 70. Eventually want to increase the number a little bit, just to 3. And again, I select this icon here to get the 3 most important constitutional remedies for that patient. Next thing we have is 08, book of answers. So again, we scroll down here until we have 08 here. I open it by clicking on the plus, and we scroll down here. We have the book of answers. Again, do a right mouse click. There are 219 possible answers in there. If I have a spiritual kind of, or esoteric kind of person, I could increase this here and get 8 possible answers to the lumbar back pain problem. And finally, or not really finally, we go to the next item. That's subtle anatomy. It's again, also in category 8. So I scroll down here a little bit, and I have here subtle anatomy. And as I said, you can see if you open that by clicking on the plus, you see there's the aura, there are the chakras, there's different prana and so forth. And again, I could increase that number of possible results to 7. And again, click on that icon. And last but not least, we have here 09, cells according to Dr. Heck. I take this further down, open up category 09 by clicking on the plus. And I have here cells according to Dr. Heck. Again, I'll increase that a bit to 6 and push that button. So now we have down here in that list, we have all the pre-selected rates that the system has chosen out of the categories here that we have selected. Next, we want to do is we want to get also a percentage value to every rate that is down here. And to do so, we just simply click on our green tree icon. But before, we want to clear the result because we did need that result here only to tell us into which category shall we go to find our results. So we don't need that information anymore. So we can clear it right now. So I click clear results here, and I click here on the little green tree icon in order to get the parameters down here with a value from 0 to 100, which you can see we have immediately here. I click on results, and again, I'll push the trigger to delete everything which is not relevant to our results. And that will leave us here with our results. I click to the result list so I can have them sorted from 0 to 100. And yeah, you can see there are some things coming up here. If I do a right mouse click here and click on show rate information, you will see that here, for example, we have Gable nucleus, and it says the nucleus medialis cerebri, also known as the Gable nucleus, is a nuclear area in the cerebellum. So it's just some additional information. It supports the motor skills. That's what it actually says here. So it could have actually something to do with this back pain in a physiological or medical way. But I just want to make you aware that these results that come up here do not necessarily have to reflect the results or do not necessarily have anything to do with what we have put in here, at least in a common medical sense. Remember, I show you this this chart the last time. Let me just flip over to it. This one here. What we are examining here when we are doing these kind of tests, we get this mental influence, we get these electromagnetic fields that might be interfering, we get these this virus, bacteria, we get this mineral deficiency eventually, we get all this information that has an influence to the regulatory system of the organism. And in this particular case, that has to do with the lumbar back pain. But remember, this could be things that do not necessarily have, in a medical sense or in a medical term, anything to do with that lumbar back pain. So I just want to make you aware of that once more. in case you find things here which you cannot directly associate to what we've put in the focusing. We have, for example, here Mercurius solubilis, we have the frontal lobe, and we have here from the Book of Answers, it seems to be safe. Of course, this is now just a statement, and you would have to evaluate that with your patient or with your client. What seems to be safe? Is he in a situation at the moment where he eventually is anxious, making the next step or moving forward in some process, and this is a bit. This has plenty of room for interpretation. These kind of wisdom teaching things, so it needs a little bit of inspiration to find the right explanation when something like this comes up. However, next step we do, because we also have things in here like serotonin, we have Mercurius solubilis. So what we want to do next is we want to find a homeopathic potency we can add to all these things in order to find the right kind of entry point to the energetic system of the body and to balance these things. And therefore, we just start a potency test. To do so, I can click here on session results. That's this icon here. And from the drop down, we select start a potency test here. So that's what we do. I click here. Again, we will need to save that test result. So I put in here scan, for example, and it will load all the results into a potency test. Remember, up here, you always get the information where you are. And also in potency test, we want to put in here our focusing. And to start the test, I just simply go here to the tools icon. And from the drop down here, I start the Viva potency test. So I select this one here to start the actual potency test. And that will bring up the results again here on the right-hand side in the result list. Again, we have all our rates, and we have here the various potencies that the items need. For example, Mercurius solubilis here needs a C30, just as an example. And if you are a classical homeopath, I know you might get very, very nervous when we put all this here together for a treatment program, but you should not worry, because remember, all these values have been tested to comply with the patient. All this weird kind of mixture which starts or which starts as low as with a this is here a potency chord. This has a D, X3, X6, X8. So it starts as low as X3 and goes as high as MM here. We have LM potencies here. So we have a whole range of potencies, but remember, this is from the Mars 3, from the Scope Q, tested to be compliant to the energy system of the patient. So you do not have to worry that you bring some sort of confusion into the organism of the body. But if you want to create globules, remember, we can create here, we can imprint a neutral carrier substance. You might want to know how to dose, which dosage the patient needs to take this mixture. And to find out the dosage, we can start here by clicking on session result. We can start what we call the VIBA dosage test. VIBA is always the name for our testing algorithm. It's an abbreviation for Virtual Interactive Biofield Analyzer. So, and if we click there, it starts automatically with a potency test. And from that list that comes up, I can select what do I want to create. Let's say, for example, we have an adult client and we want to create globules. So I do a double click on this entry here, and this immediately starts the testing process, and you will get an expanded result list, which you can switch actually by clicking on this icon down here. You can click from this potency test view to the standard result list test view. And you can see here's a number of figures in here. And I will explain that to you when we look at the printout. So to get a printout, I will save this test. I will have again this in here, and I put in here now potency test. And it will bring us back to the entry screen of the test wizard. And you can see this list here gets slowly filled up. So just to recap, we've been doing the main test always. And from the main test, we've been going straight into potency test, where we tested for the potency and also for the dosage. And to view now our potency and dosage test result, I mark this entry and I go to print here, and I select here dosage report, and I can, for example, select here immediately a PDF format that will create a PDF for me. So here we have our result PDF. If I scroll down, you can see now here we have the figures that we had before in the result matrix, and here you can see now what these figures mean. You have an explanation here. We have, for example, an initial dosage with that patient, and in that particular case, there is no initial doses because there's a 0 here, so we don't have any initial doses, but we have a normal dose, and this normal dose in this case is 4 globules. And then we have a reduced dose here, which means in the last week, the patient takes only the reduced dose of 2 globules. And we have here the number of days. So the number per day, sorry. So he takes 2 globules, 4 globules, sorry, normal dose is 4 globules twice a day, and for 5 weeks. This is the number of weeks here. And he takes it before meals. That's this one here. So, and in the last one of these 5 weeks, he's taking the reduced dose, which was just 2 globules. So this is actually the treatment plan for the treatment that we have tested. And to go back to the printout options that we have here, we could also print out, of course, just the pure result list as a PDF. So we have here the category of the rates. So for example, here are the organs, and within that category we have here the various rates here, frontal lobe, and here we have the result percentage and the value, as I said before, the value we will discuss when we talk about the color tuning. And we have also the items with 0, because we have marked red, because as discussed before, the 0 values are also very important. I want to show to you another way of running a main test, just very briefly, because we're already running late again. If you go back into the main test, we go back into the focusing, and we want to choose another template, for example. If we want to, for example, just create a flower essence to help the person, or if we want to, for example, get a Schüssler remedy that's good for that person, we could just call up that Schüssler biochemistry template, push the button here, and we get the appropriate Schüssler remedy we could give the patient to ease the back pain. So that's also a quick access, but in this particular case, it's a good example. You can see that the highest value that we have achieved with that template is 64. And remember, we said everything which is relevant is higher than 70. So if this patient would take silicea, it wouldn't be bad because it's still 64. So it still has, it's under 70. It has still a slight relevance, but it would not be as efficient as using the rates that we have tested before, which were some up to 99. So this will also tell us that in this particular case, the Schüssler remedies are not a very efficient option to treat this patient, for example. So there you can also get a very quick feedback on what is helpful, what is not helpful. But I will still save that. So put in here Schüssler. Okay, so that was the test wizard. And next is, of course, treating the patient. And to treat the patient, or to balance the patient, we go into projections. So I click on the projections icon, and that brings us to the projection screen. And in the projection screen, you can see we have here a number of various tabs we could select from. And first of all, we eventually want to create some globules for this patient. So I'm going to select the tab potency test. And from that drop down here, I select the test that we have just done. And in order to be able to imprint that on globules, I need to bring it somehow down into that list here, which is empty right now, because that is our output list that then goes either on the EECS card, or can go on globules, or can go on direct balancing, which means either the hand applicators or through the distance, or can go again to the auxiliary port if you want to connect the Mars 3 or the qubit to an external device, like for example a bioresonance device. You could send the information to that device if you want to use that option. But to get all our rates down in that field, we click on that icon here. That brings everything down. And from there, we could now, for example, create some homeopathic remedies. And to do so, I click on the remedy icon, and I could now use my globules here that I have. It's just a vial with some sugar draggies. Put them in the output cup and click on clear remedy first to energetically clear the remedies. And once that's gone through, I click on imprint to actually print the information we have put in here onto the globules. The other option is to balance the patient. And to do so, we click on this icon here. And therefore, if the patient is sitting next to us, I could again tick the aux button, and that would bring out everything to the max hand applicators. And again, I want to set the balancing values here. If I do a direct treatment with the hand applicators, you want to set the timing parameters here that you have a total balancing of 20 minutes. So at the moment, we have only 2 minutes 15, which means we want to increase the number of cycles. So I increase the number of cycles in this case here to 60. And that will bring the total time of the treatment up to 23 minutes. And to start the treatment, I just click here on broadcasting. That will start the treatment. And if the patient's sitting next to me, he gets the treatment on the aux hand applicators. I stop it for now. And if we want to do a distant treatment, that's for the scope Q users, you just make sure that aux is unticked and you click broadcasting. That will do the distant treatment. Remember, we have scanned in the patient witness, so everything goes through the distance to the patient. And if you are a scope Q user, you might want to save that treatment setting in the balancing tab here. And to do so, you click Save. And that asks you, do we want to save this balancing in the patient history? You click Yes. And you just copy in here our focusing. And the next time you want to treat a patient, you just go to Patients, do a double click here to select the patient, go to Projections, go to Balanced, and recall that balance setting. Go to the broadcasting setting, dissect the time settings, and it can go just back to broadcasting. And if you are a MAS 3 user, you don't have to do that because you can actually program a distant treatment in the future broadcasting setting here. Again, we can just copy in our focusing, which is Control V. And then I do a setting, for example, I want to do a treatment here for 1 week, let's say, and I want to have a treatment for 20 minutes. I want to have a 2 hours pause, and that should be going on. We have today Wednesday, so it should go on a Wednesday. There is a pause on Thursday, should be a treatment on Friday, pause on Saturday, treatment on Sunday, pause on Monday, and the next Tuesday. And if I decide that the treatment should only go during the day, I click here on daytime, or I can also adjust to individual settings, because when you do that, distant broadcasting, the MAS 3 and the computer need to be switched on. So if you start working in the morning, just say at 10, and you go back home by 6, you could set these individual time settings here. But just as an example, I switch now to the daytime setting. And if I click Save, you will see here blue lines. And these are the lines when the distant treatment will actually happen. And if I go to the entry screen here by clicking Copen Today, you can see now we have here programmed a distant treatment for Angelica, and we have here the start and end time. And if I actually click on that entry, do a double click, I can see all the parameters that are gonna be sent to her, and see all the parameter settings, and could eventually change that if I decide I want to do that 1 month, 1 week longer or so. I can change that. You can see it's changed here also in that list. Okay, so that was my run through the scope scope Q / scope testing procedure. And let's go through the questions that we have so far. So one of the questions was, so focusing is rather for us than for a patient? Well, yes, no, because remember I said before, we have a triangle with the patient. We have the system, we have you, and we have system here, we have you, we have the patient. So it's a triangle, and the focusing is basically for focusing the testing to a defined purpose. So it helps you, or it helps basically the whole testing process to be more specific on why the patient is coming for you. Next question is, can I use special characters such as comma between different symptoms? For example, lumbar pain, knee pain, numb toe. Yes, you can. You can use commas, but you should not use exclamation marks or backslashes, forward slashes. You should avoid that. Comma is all right, also full stop, but you should not use any hashtags or any other of these kind of special characters. Next question was, when balancing, do you still need to have the sample in the input cup? No, because we have scanned in the sample into the system. And when we do balancing, be it in the scope Q or in the MAS3, we always use the information that we have scanned in for that particular patient. Next question is, why would you change from 5 to 12 in brain category since the system selected 5? How do we know the number to change to? That was in the testing when I was changing all these figures in the square brackets. No, the system is not actually suggesting the 5. The 5 came from defining the template. We will see that next time when we discuss the database and setting up templates. You will see how these figures are defined. Actually, the 5 is set when defining the template. And I changed that in the brain category because I said, well, we are discussing lumbar pain. Lumbar pain could have a neurological issue. And as the brain came up, I thought it might make sense to increase that number. That's basically a therapeutic decision you want to do when you run through that test setting. And that's basically just a way to have an influence on the outcome of the result by your, let's say, therapeutic experience or therapeutic intuition. Or so that's how you can focus more on certain categories or put more emphasis on certain categories. Next question was, do not use full Viber tree. Yes, that was referring to probably go back to the test wizard to illustrate that kind of question. We go back to the test wizard, to the main wizard. When selecting some templates, it can be so we put in already here, attention, do not use VBA full automatic. If you would use the VBA, which is this green icon here, on this template, the system would be blocked for like half an hour or so. So you have to be careful when clicking on that icon here when choosing templates. And even if you use large templates that you might have created yourself with hundreds of nodes in there, it might take a long time when you click on that icon until you get the result. So I think Anna, that's what you meant when you came up with that question. Next question is from, would you recommend globules, liquids, or projections for treatment sessions? Is one better than the other? Using globules, or of course also liquids, has something to do with the patient compliance. If you give the patient some globules or some liquids and tell him you have to use that 3 times daily for the next 2 weeks, he takes on some kind of responsibility. And if you do the distance treatment, you can do that. If you have a Mars 3, I recommend to do that always, because you have these distant treatment slots. It doesn't matter how many people you program in there. So it's a process that runs in the background and gives them a constant information, a constant impulse. But nevertheless, I still think it makes sense to give them something that they have to take responsibility themselves. So just so that they also take responsibility for their healing process, so that they kind of have a daily routine or a daily action they need to take in order to get better. So I think theoretically you could do also only distant treatment. My wife just had a case which she was treating a newborn in the clinic. So it was impossible basically to bring any liquids or any globules into the clinic, because the small newborn was in intensive care. So she did it all through the distant treatment. It was quite successful, actually. But as I said, in order for patient compliance, normally I would suggest to always give also something to the patient, so that he's some responsibility for his own situation. Then next question, can broadcast treatment at the same time for multiple clients? Yes, in the Mars 3, yes, you can treat more people at the same time. That's the big advantage of the Mars 3 over the Scope Q. So you can treat several people at the same time, no problem. Next question or comment was, I refer to God in this to my belief, or I refer to God, is this to my belief or the patient in the focusing? That's actually to your belief. The focusing, I said before, you can put in some spiritual add-on to it, if you like, because you as the therapist, or you as the user, need to be comfortable with whatever you're doing, because you are actually kind of initializing the healing process with that tool that you're using. So you need to be comfortable. So it should be in your kind of worldview, or in your universe, put it that way. Whatever you put in there. If you're as I said, a religious person, a Catholic person, you might refer to God, or might ask a guardian angel to help. If you're a Buddhistic person, you might just say thank you, or put a prayer in there, or whatever. It's important that you feel comfortable with it. Next question, how do you give both supplements and homeopathy? Supplements, you give just, I suppose you mean in the that came up in the result list. In the result list, eventually supplements came up, and also homeopathy. But whatever we do with the Mars 3 is always a homeopathic type remedy. So even if you give vitamin C with the Mars 3 created, you still give the information. So you always have a homeopathic type information. And you have that quite regularly, that people take vitamins like vitamin D, for example, and eventually, if you do blood tests, you will find that they cannot digest it properly. So in the blood, you still have a low vitamin D level. And that can be helped if you give it also on the information level, like vitamin D in a potency C100 or so. That could help the metabolic process in the organism, and could help them to intake the actual vitamin that they take as a food supplement better. So you can combine both. But if you use the food supplements that are in the Mars 3, the vitamins, the minerals, and so etc., that's always a homeopathic type remedy, and so you can always use that in combination. Next question, will we discuss the length of the treatment and broadcasting? We can do, but I would suggest not now, because it's probably going to take another 10 minutes. I would do as a suggestion for a standard treatment in multi-broadcasting, I would suggest 20 minutes with at least 2 hours pause. However, if you're familiar with dowsing, you can dowse for the time settings. And if you do the treatment with a scope Q, I would always suggest a minimum treatment time of 20 minutes, maximum 30 minutes, because 20 minutes is in energetic medicine a general rule of thumb to apply any kind of treatment for the energy system to adjust to it. So that's why there's a standard treatment time 20 minutes. Next question, when I say time for multiple broadcasting, I mean, can you plan multiple clients for 8 a.m. broadcast, for instance? Yes, you can. You can line them all up for 8 a.m. at the morning. It's no problem. Okay, sorry, took longer again this time. I hope I will stay within my hour frame next time. Just very briefly for you as a reminder, just as a quick reminder, if you haven't done so, please go to our website, register for our newsletter, and please, if you haven't done so, and I hope you find it interesting tonight, enroll for our next webinar on the 7th of May, and also for the fourth part of this session on the 21st of May. 7th of May will be the database and setting up templates, and 21st of May will be the color tuning. So thank you very much for being my guest tonight. Well, there was one last. No question anymore. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me so long, and I hope you have again got some inspiration from today. Have a beautiful evening, beautiful day, and thank you very much for staying with me so long. And yeah, I hope to see you again in 2 weeks' time. However, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out for us. Matthew will always be there for your technical questions, Elke for your operation questions. Thanks for joining, and hope to see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye, guys. Take care.